I'm Joe from Cole's Music, and what I want to talk about today is how to bend notes on a wind instrument, because what I'm going to demonstrate can be done on a saxophone, can be done on a clarinet, probably the other instruments. But when I was trying to learn how to bend a note, I was thinking that you did it with the jaw. And it took me a while to discover that it's not done with the jaw, it's done by voicing. As a matter of fact, when I hear a lot of modern recordings of people bending a note, they're doing it with the jaw, and you can always tell because there's a distortion in the sound. Where if it's done by voicing, you're just literally bending a note. I just think it's something that's fun to do. It's a device that is written in some classical pieces, but in jazz, especially early jazz, it was a very commonly used device. So how do you get started bending a note? Now, in another video, I'm going to talk about relaxing the jaw and playing very open with an open throat. And that is one of the things you have to make sure you're doing in the beginning. So a lot of times a student will come to me about bending a note, and they're thinking of doing a bend upward. And I always say the way to learn to bend a note is to go downward first. So I'm going to start with 2 points. One would be is first practice playing and singing octaves. Because once you have that octave in your ear, that's going to give you a great starting point. So what I would do as a first experiment in this is I would take a B on the saxophone. Actually, a B on the clarinet would work too. But play a B and try to think of the sound going downward. See how I'm lowering that pitch? Now, how I'm doing that is literally singing the pitch and just dropping it. So to start out, what you want to do is practice singing. You don't have to sing that exact pitch, but singing a note and dropping your pitch, like going, ah, and think of what you do when you do that. I always say, now vocal teachers will probably not like me explaining it this way, but I always say, imagine your voice as aiming a hose straight forward. And when you drop your voice, you're just changing the angle of where you're aiming the hose downward. So, ah. See how I'm doing that? So I'm doing that by changing where my voice is aimed. If we can all sing pitches, and if we think of a scale as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, if we think of singing the scale upward, but would imagine bending the note upward, ba. So the beginning of this is doing it vocally. I always say do it when nobody else is home, because they're going to think you're crazy. But practice singing those pitches. Then taking your saxophone or the clarinet, and as I say, B is a good note to start out on, and try to get that pitch to go down. Now, when you start out, you might find that that pitch doesn't want to move. You might get it to go down just fractionally. And so a lot of times I have students, they'll go home for a week, come back next week, and they'll say, I got nowhere on it. And so the pitch just hardly moves at all. I'll say, just keep at it, but sing it, then play it. Sing it, then play it. And that's going to get you able to move that pitch downward. And after a while, you'll notice you'll get to half step, then a whole step, farther and farther and farther. And then, once you learn how to voice downward, what you do is you bring the pitch down, and then you bring it back up again, but not with the jaw. I can't stress that enough. That's not a fun way to do it. In fact, especially on the Rhapsody in Blue introduction on clarinet, I know so many clarinet players that try to do it using jaw pressure, and the only thing they end up with is a very sore lip. So I'll say, totally with voicing, keeping the jaw very relaxed. And the other point is to keep that air moving. So a lot of people, what they do is the pitch goes down, they're trying to slow down the airspeed. And that will only result in you losing focus of the sound or losing the sound entirely. So you want to keep the jaw loose, the airspeed consistent. And that'll teach you how to start to bend those notes. And then once you can successfully do that, then you can practice bending, starting on a lower note and then bending upper to an upper note. Now what's important there is that you have in your ear what pitch you're going to end up on. It used to be there was a jazz player that people would always ask me, what do I think of his playing? And he would bend notes slightly, but the problem was he'd never arrive at the correct pitch. And so I never could get past that. He was a great jazz player, but the pitches never landed where they should land, you know. So the thing is, you know, Henry Ford once said, what makes you successful is keeping your eyes on the goal. And failure is taking your eyes off the goal. And so what we want to do is almost like look at the pitch we're going to and make sure we're aiming toward that pitch. So there's how you would just, you practice. So downward first. And once you get a good downward, and after a while, you'll be able to get almost an octave going downward without changing your fingers, then that'll teach you how to come back up again. And that's a starter for bending notes.